Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, How to Cut Cost on Compliance, Not Corners in Today's Economy, presented by Avalara. Before we get started, let's go over some housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to attend. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our polling questions throughout the webinar and the closing survey. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend this event. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business. Today, we're excited to have our close partner and tax experts, Avalara, with us to share how tax automation can help your business stay compliant, improve accuracy, and reduce cost. So whether you're here researching a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to get an expert opinion by asking any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on their social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we post more on-demand content like this live webinar. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Cameron and Brian to get things started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you for everyone in attendance for spending some time with us today to go over how to cut costs on tax compliance and not corners, really how to increase efficiency and reduce costs through sales tax automation. It's going to be presented by myself, Cameron Murphy. I'm a Senior Strategic Alliance Manager, and I'm joined by Brian Gavin, a sales executive on our team out on the East Coast. So once again, appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to take a look at how the tax compliance environment has really changed for folks. And do you have Nexus? You know, a lot of prospects that we talk to, SWK customers, they're just not 100% on where they may have to collect or remit to the state. So we're going to go through some Nexus. Do you have the triggers that creates an obligation to go ahead and collect and remit to the state? So we'll also go over some efficiency with exemption certificate management, tips to streamline tax compliance as well. And we'll go ahead and get started right now. So going to the first slide here, how the tax compliance environment has changed. So what has really kind of moved around, you know, post-pandemic, before that, after that, really over the last 12 months, I'm sure we've all felt it, whether it's taking your car and going to the pump and getting gas, or you're at the local grocery store and you have seen prices creep up. But over the last 12 months, you can see some of the numbers here for energy prices, medical care prices, household furnishing and operation prices, new vehicles. If you've ever gone recently to buy even just a used car, prices for those are through the roof. And I know when I go to my local market, I can definitely feel the increase that inflation has caused to the prices. So as they do increase, so do state tax revenues, correct? Because it is a percentage of the total revenue that they get. So inflation coupled with post-pandemic activity has led to lower tax revenue due to consumption of non-taxable services. So states are actually getting less. So that means that they're going to be out there looking to audit folks and see what has been collected and remitted to them and what they feel they're owed versus what they got. And some states have tweaked the tax holidays to reduce gas taxes to ease burden on consumers. So I know definitely during the pandemic and after the pandemic, states have been a little less rigid, a little bit more flexible, extending things like the tax deadline date, you know, helping out with different areas for consumers. I know in California, where I live, we've done a lot of tax breaks and a lot of incentive payments. So over the last 12 months, I think we've all felt the increase of what inflation has done for us. So some of that as well, I know during COVID, the impact of supply chain issues. Again, living in California, I think there were times where we drove down the coast and you could see just the cargo ships out on the ocean just waiting to get into port. I know a lot of the products were held up there, and some of the suppliers that do a lot of overseas procurement were really feeling the crunch from supply chain issues. I know one of the stories, there's a shoe manufacturer that's 100% made in the United States that did really well during the pandemic because they didn't have to rely on any goods or services coming non-domestic or out of the United States. So definitely creates a lot more complexity for suppliers, distributors, manufacturers with drop shipping. What certificates do we need to have on file to show if we actually we did what we remitted was at a discount on a line item for a SKU? Was it taxable or not taxable? Just having all of those documents ready, which Avalara can definitely help with. And then any more refunds. Do sales and use tax returns need to be amended? What do we do with those? Is that on the actual consumer for B2B? Is that more of a B2C function? With some of these supply chain issues on tax compliance, we've had a lot of questions from our prospects over the last year, 2 years on how do we get more visibility? How do you guys help? Brian's been great in working with those folks and listening to their current environment, really their capabilities, what they need, and how we can help with that. So that's definitely something we're interested in hearing, where you're at in your business and how we can help. So that's going to bring us to our first poll question. Courtney, I believe this goes back over to you.
Yes, so we're going to launch our first poll question now. And we're asking, how much urgency do you feel to implement an automated sales and tax compliance solution right now? So a couple answers there. We'd really appreciate your participation, just sort of seeing, where everyone's at in the audience. So is this something you really need? Is it on your to-do list? Is it not on your radar until, you're attending this webinar? So I think, now it's on your radar. Or are you already a pro? So thank you for everyone who's answered so far. We're just going to leave this open for a few more seconds. Okay, and we're going to close in just 1 second. So if you haven't had an opportunity to answer. So I'm going to pop these on the screen real fast. So Cameron, I'm not sure if you can see or not, but we're actually pretty much across the board. So we don't have any tax automation pros yet, but 1/3 of our audience, is feeling the pain, and this is something they really need. 1/3 has it on their to-do list, and the other third, just hasn't had it on their radar yet.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, I see the poll question place marker, so that's good to know. Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and continue on here. Brian is going to be joining us now to go through some of the ins and outs of Nexus, some of the stuff that we have for exemption certificate management. So Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, I appreciate it, Cameron. Guys, thank you so much for joining today. I'm Brian Gavin, direct partner with SWK. I really work directly with the customers. So really, the most important thing that we speak about is, sales tax nexus. And it all comes down to Nexus. Most of the inbound calls that I have are referrals that I get from SWK dealing directly with those customers are businesses concerned or really just wanting to clarify if they're compliant and registered in the proper states. Sales tax nexus defines that level of connection between the jurisdictions and your entity, and obviously the business. Next slide, Cameron. So multiple different types of nexus. And, when you think about it first, physical nexus, brick and mortar, think about it as people, places, and things. Where do you have employees? Where do you have locations? Where are you storing inventory? And then you think about economic nexus. There's no physical needed. And this is where the Wayfair decision in the Supreme Court in 2018 really changed things. This was a big trigger event at Avalara, where economic nexus really started impacting businesses on where they needed to get registered. And then when you think about click-through nexus, example of eBay, where a seller meets sales thresholds in a state from the activities. Affiliate nexus, it really impacts the remote retail sellers. And, is it owned by in-state retailer? It sells the same similar type of product. But the big one that I really deal with a lot of the customers is marketplace nexus. E-commerce, selling on Amazon, selling on Walmart, eBay, for example. And I get most of the inbound calls that we get are people that are just not really educated on Nexus. And, that Wayfair decision, back in 2018 might have been a trigger event then, but it's still, we get multiple calls, and that's where we're able to really support and help. When you think about Avalara, we look at it as, I always look at it as two kind of projects. How do we get you compliant? And then how do we help you with automation? So how do we look back and see how we can help you get current, make sure you're registered and compliant, and then also really that automation piece. Next slide, Cameron. So there's so many different ways of creating Nexus, multiple state locations, having businesses, having different locations for your business, owning and leasing property. That's a big one that we get a lot of inquiries about, and people wanting to understand, where did they create Nexus? Field sales and service, think about going to trade shows. That's a big one too. If you're going to trade shows, that can create Nexus. A lot of remote sales, direct and online sales, maintaining inventory, drop shipping is a big one. Next slide, Cameron. So 88% of businesses said that Wayfair decision really impacted them. Like I mentioned, even though it happened in 2018, we get multiple inquiries. Home rule requirements. I mean, that was a really big one in Colorado, and that really impacted. And there's a lot of other states that really have those local tax jurisdictions. So they're not so much just worried about state. I think about, states like Louisiana with all the parishes, Colorado. I mean, for example, in Colorado, we did a training exercise when we first started Avalara, where they gave us, they gave us a business that was selling into locations, and it's basically a different tax rate across the street. So it gets very complex is the point of Nexus. And I think that's the thing that concerns a lot of businesses, basically wanting to understand truly in all of those 45 states, have they created Nexus, and really wanting to understand, has that been, basically imposed sales tax on them. Next slide. So big slide here. I think a lot of the, business owners that I speak to think that the main rule is $100,000 in sales or 200 transactions. And that's kind of the rule of thumb that we go with. But I use that very lightly because it starts to get very complex. As you can see from this map, there's a lot of states that have, $500,000 thresholds, $250,000 thresholds. Some states don't count transactions. Some states do count transactions, and it starts to get very complex. And with that said, a big one that I deal with a lot is exempt sales. Oh, we're exempt. We deal with a lot of exempt sales, and 75% of the states actually consider exempt sales a part of Nexus thresholds. That's a very big misconception. So it's very important that, by tracking all of this and making sure that you're checking in which states you have created Nexus based off of dollars and or transactions. And these change all the time, these thresholds. Next slide, please.
All right, looks like we get another poll question.
Yes, so this poll should be launching right now. And we want to know, how confident are you that you're registered and collecting in the correct jurisdictions? I guess I can't speak today, in states. So thank you everyone who's answered so far. So far we're a bit more, agreed upon right here on this question. We're gonna leave it open for just a few more seconds if you haven't had a chance to respond yet. And we're going to close out this poll now. So surprising or not surprising, 100% of poll respondents said they're very confident that they're registered and collecting in the correct jurisdictions or states. So
All right,
That's awesome.
perfect. Thank you, Courtney. Brian, thank you for going through that part. Looks like we're going to be moving into our exemption certificate management. Nexus is such a tricky thing. I know the slide with the Nexus generating activities, I think just 2 years ago, there was like 3 or 4 bullet points on there. Now it looks like there's almost up to 2 dozen. It's going to be interesting to see in the next few years how many more additional triggers or activities are going to be added to that, because I know it's constantly changing. So if you want to take us through ECM, and then I'll jump back over to some of the intrinsic costs of do nothing.
Yeah, and to your point, you were just sharing, Cameron, there was a statistic with Avalara with risk assessments from 2021. In all of the customers that we did risk assessments with, 3 states came back that the customer was not expecting, whether it was physical or economic nexus. So that was a statistic from all risk assessments that we did for customers. But to jump into exemption certificate management, which we call ECM Pro. So this is what I like to call the middle software, where I deal with a lot of Sage customers. I deal with a lot of manufacturing and distribution businesses, and that, basically are storing or collecting certificates, whether it's vendor or whether it's customer certificates. And this software is really meant to, manage and store those certificates, really bring it to a digital state, and very, I like to think of it as the best way to get out of the kind of file cabinets and keeping certificates just stored. And a lot of businesses are not aware of that. With most of the audits that I hear from are basically because of certificates not collecting it. So this software really is meant to store and collect those certificates and keep everything compliant for the business and having it audit ready. So next slide, please, Cameron. So as I said, it really helps with customer and vendor certificates. It goes both ways. And with that said, the purpose of this is really, the purchasing of exemption certificate management is where customers choose whether their need for customer exemption management or vendor. And this briefly touches on the differences. Many manufacturers and distributors need both. And a big one that I really hear about when we are kind of working with a lot of businesses that have that deal with a lot of exempt sales, don't realize that if you're dealing with a vendor that is in multiple states, you really need to collect certificates for every particular state. So as you can see below, if you're a buyer that is a government entity or using products for resale, manufacturing, a seller is one of the above. So basically, we can handle both versions, the incoming and outgoing of the certificates. Next slide. So as I said, this is really where it brings you to the digital state, this software. It gets you out of the file cabinets, and it manages the incoming and outgoing. The one thing that I like to really mention is that we also bring it a step further with something called managed services. It's a big piece that a lot of businesses come to Avalara for. We actually like to call it the Fresh Start campaign, where businesses are coming to us saying, hey, we've got 500 exempt customers. We do a decent job at collecting them, but we probably have maybe 250 or 300, or you're not even sure that you're collecting certificates that have expired. So this is really where we validate those certificates. This is where we're able to do the tax ID verifications, and make sure that you're collecting the proper certificates. And with that said, that managed services that I did speak of, it's a team at Avalara that goes out and truly collects certificates on behalf of the business by doing email campaigns and really going out and making sure that we're collecting all the proper forms, bringing you kind of fully compliant with all the certificates that you do need for your business stored in this system. Next slide.
And I think we got a movie here, so if I can get it to play.
You always put taking care of your customers first. But before you can, you've got to take care of exemption certificates. They're the forms that prove a business is exempt from paying sales tax. If you don't collect sales tax from a customer, you may need to collect their exemption certificate. And as state laws on sales tax collection expand, the requirements for when you need to collect exemption certificates expands too, which means businesses may need to deal with more exemption certificates than ever before. And it's important to deal with them because states are auditing more aggressively than before too. The problem is manually requesting, collecting, validating, storing, accessing, and updating hundreds or thousands of new and expiring exemption certificates is time-consuming, expensive, and can slow down orders and business. But waiting to do it risks non-compliance and liability. Fortunately, Avalara can help. Avalara's exemption certificate management solution can automate the entire certificate management process from one secure cloud-based application. With Avalara, you can easily import all the certificates you already have, request new certificates either one at a time or all at once, and even collect certificates on your e-commerce site. When you do, your customers will receive a link to our online portal that helps them upload or create the right certificate for their unique business. Then the platform automatically validates to double check each one before filing. Plus, set up alerts so that when certificates expire, you and your customers can be notified automatically. You can access all your certificates from a single dashboard, explore comprehensive reports, easily search, and customize your company's specific exemption rules to ensure you're always audit ready. So you can rest easy knowing your exemption certificates are taken care of and focus on taking care of your customers. Learn more at avalara.com.
All right, that was great. I still got you, Brian?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll go through these next couple slides on tips to streamline tax compliance. Did a report and some analysis with a third party on kind of doing just the cost of business as usual. So really just kind of an environment of not being compliant with a tool to set it and forget it, but just almost ignoring it and putting it on the back burner completely. So this is a very visual slide for me as far as small and mid-sized businesses and what is actually spent from a time perspective of their individuals at the business that is focused on manual processes and making sure that they're trying to get to 100% on all the different areas. And what does how many actual hours of work is that a year for them to do that and not focus on revenue generating events and really utilizing their talents to the best of their abilities. So we have things like admin taxability changes, the actual prep and filing of the tax return, managing any audits that come in, researching the rules, where do I look, where's the latest chart, what do I apply, and then just managing the actual tax requirements for the business. So you can see here for small businesses, all the different hours that add up, and for mid-size, and the total is about 302 hours loss, or really almost 2 months of the year that a financial person has to look at this for the business. So I know we get a lot of times, or sometimes where we'll be in discussions with one of our prospects and going through the motion, and it's, yeah, I just don't know if I'm ready to invest in getting compliant. you're already investing in it. It just is not an actual, pricing proposal, but it is something where you're losing lots of hours to having just a manual processes. So I like to show this slide because it just really tallies up all the time that's spent and energy on trying to get compliant, and then at the same time still relying on a manual processes that has holes in it, regardless of how hard we work to try to get it going. So just a very visual slide. We always like to share that. And that's going to lead us to our third poll question. Courtney, over to you.
Great, thank you, Cameron. So yes, our third poll, just curious, how many hours do you think you're spending on your current processes a week? So, weekly, are you spending 1 to 5 hours, more than 10? You don't have any idea. So we appreciate your participation. Thank you for those who've already answered. I'm just interested to see, how much time are you putting towards this right now? And thank you. We're just going to leave this one open for just a few more seconds. Okay, and we're closing out that poll. So Brian and Cameron, it looks like on that one we were a little bit across the board as well. So some people are 1 to 5, some more than 10, and then a few just had no idea.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Awesome. So Brian, we're going to turn it over to you to take us home here. Back over to you.
Absolutely. This is the determination flow of automation. This is how the whole system works. So in the middle there where you see your systems, this is where we've replaced that native function with our rates, rules, and boundaries, which is AvaTax. And, with that said, we connect through obviously the ERP system, or if different shopping carts, whether it be Shopify or WooCommerce. This is where you're making that tax determination. So the invoice is coming through and we're determining whether that is taxable or not. And if it is taxable, obviously we're putting that exact rate, and we call it the sub-second challenge. It's instant. Think about kind of like an Amazon shopping cart. We're automatically putting that tax rate onto that and determining if it is taxable or not. And then if it isn't, and it is an exempt sale, back to 2 points from that video is one, with the exemption management, I wanted to point out from that video where they said Cert Express. That's the link that we use for you to send to customers to collect exemption certificates. So it's real easy for your customers, and we can also apply that to shopping carts. And then also with the exemption management, one other point I wanted to bring out from that video is the dashboard. On your dashboard in ECM Pro, it gives you a complete global view of how many exempt customers you have and how many certificates that you have, and gives you those notifications. But here with the determination, so with the invoice coming through, if it's taxable, it's going to put the correct rate on it. If it's not taxable, it's basically going to go back through exemption management and check if that certificate is on file for that customer. And if that customer has a certificate, it's going to bring back that 0 determination. And then obviously after that, basically we have captured all of that data to do all of your sales tax returns. Kind of think of it just like a payroll company. And we file and take the liability for all of those tax returns. And with that said, I kind of like I mentioned, the exemption management is really that middle software and brings you to that digital state. Next slide. So this is a big one that I've really loved. These last 2 slides are my favorite 2 slides. I know a lot of people in the poll said they were very confident with it, but we do offer free risk assessments. But one of the things that I really talk to a lot of customers about after we do the risk assessments is the streamlined sales tax program. And I like to always break this down into like layman terms, because a lot of people are not aware of the streamlined sales tax program. So one, Avalara is one of 5 companies that's a certified provider of the streamlined sales tax program. And basically what it is, it was a program that started in the late 90s, but it really got a lot of attention after that Wayfair decision. And basically the state said, hey, how do we incentivize a business owner to move forward and get registered? Either A, because they're not educated that they needed to be registered in a certain state. Again, not sure if you created Nexus in other states, or if it's basically just not sure, you know, hey, we don't want to get registered in that state, and you're kind of playing with tax exposure, to be completely transparent. So to incentivize business owners, if you don't have people, places, or things, so if you don't have employees in one of these particular states, these 24 states that are a part of the program, if you don't have any inventory in any of those states, and if you also don't have any locations, Avalara will basically back out all of the registrations. So registrations with Avalara cost $349. We waive that registration because the state reimburses Avalara for that. The transactions, as I showed you on that determination slide before, every single one of those API calls that comes into Avalara, we don't charge for that API call because the state reimburses us for those API calls. And lastly, the real big gain is the returns. So let's say you have monthly returns, you have 12 returns in one of those particular states. Avalara will not charge you for doing those returns because we get reimbursed from the state. When I find a business that is, let's say, has 1 or 2 locations, but is operating in multiple states, this is a real competitive advantage that Avalara has because of the fact that there's a lot of businesses that are registered in, call it, 10, 20, 30 states. And when I basically do an analysis with them and explain the streamlined sales tax program, and I do all of the data and check for them and make sure that they get qualified, it will significantly bring down the cost because we get you enrolled into this. And even if you're registered in one of these states, you can still participate in that program, and the gain for you is really going to be the returns, because that's where really a lot of the cost would come from. This is an amazing program, and I would honestly say that 75% of the people that I speak to when I kind of do introduction calls are not aware of this. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the risk assessment, basically what Avalara, or call it a Nexus study, basically what we do is we send a survey out to the business, and the survey is a bunch of questions about, where are your employees? If you have remote employees, where do you have locations? Where are you selling into? We collect a little bit of data, and these are typically $4,500, and that's very competitive compared to CPA firms or accountants that do risk assessments. And as a courtesy, we offer these to SWK customers at no charge. And basically, we always start with a risk assessment because I like to think of it as the diagnosis. If we do a risk assessment, that kind of gives us the blueprint to move forward. And there's plenty of customers that have come take the risk assessment, and at least and if it comes back with nothing, at least you can sleep easy knowing, as some of the people answered on the poll before, that we're confident that, hey, you have tracked Nexus and you know exactly where your business should be registered. And how this works is, after that survey is completed, we send you the report, and after that report, we schedule a call with one of our tax directors to walk you through that report and explain maybe why you created Nexus in a certain state. And we make recommendations, but ultimately it's the business owner's decision on what to do with that. And I've had plenty of people take the risk assessment and not move forward with Avalara at all. Or some people take the risk assessment and realize, hey, 2, 3, 4 states showed up. Maybe we should address this. And Avalara not only does automation as we shared on the slides before, and exemption management, but we also handle compliance, whether it's getting registered in states or possibly doing a VDA because you've been selling into a state for so long and weren't aware that you created it. So this is a really great promotion that we share with customers, and it's a great starting point. I know before some people said they would, maybe look at this or have other projects going on, but it's a great way to just identify if you're registered in proper states that you need to be.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people take advantage of this, especially if we're offering it for free, which is great.
And Cameron, it was I believe last quarter of 22 where these weren't free, and
No.
we were just doing it for a quarter, and we just saw such an uptick that here we are in May and the promotion's still going, because Avalara realized we started to see a lot of customers start to come forward by just taking this and then saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we do want to take a look at Avalara's services.
Yeah, especially when you get concrete results, right, that you can look at and digest and then move at your pace, which is always a great thing. So yeah, we appreciate you sharing those, especially the last two slides. I know we do this a lot, and those are your favorites. So that we're able to share those with the folks on the line as well. Courtney, I think this is our last poll question of the day.
Yes. All right. Yes, final poll. So if you guys hang in there with us for one more poll, we just would like to know if you're ready to start your free tax assessment today. So if you'd like to get that free tax assessment, like Brian said, even if you're confident, and it'll give you peace of mind. So appreciate everyone who's answered so far, and we'll just give that a few more seconds, and then we're going to move on into our Q&A portion. So if you already answered the poll, go ahead and get your questions ready. You can put any questions in the question section of your GoToWebinar or in the chat box. We'll be monitoring both, and then we're gonna, go into Q&A and get Brian and Cameron to answer those questions for you guys. And thanks for everyone who's answered. We're gonna close that poll out. Okay, guys, are you ready to do some Q&A?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a few questions that came in throughout the presentation. And then, as you guys submit questions from the audience, I will ask those to Brian and Cameron for you. So first question is, do I need to change anything in my ERP to use Avalara?
Brian, you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that. No, nothing. So basically, we work directly with SWK on implementing AvaTax exemption certificate management. Nothing needs to change in the ERP system. We just connect. So basically, like I said, we replace that native function of example, let's say Sage. We replace that native function of Sage and we tie AvaTax into it. So nothing needs to change in the ERP system. We're just connecting into the system.
Yep, that's great.
Awesome, great. Our next question, is about implementation. So how difficult is automation to implementation in setup? So how difficult is that whole process to go through? They said they're a small business and their firm does not have a lot of staff time to dedicate to tech support and implementation.
Oh, great question. I'll take that one, Cameron. So, SWK is a certified implementation partner. So we have a special team that works directly with SWK. So you work directly with SWK, and typically an implementation time, and I would say we like to say 60 to 90 days. But when you're working with SWK, it goes a lot quicker. So the implementation really is not that time consuming. I would like to say, call it 1 to 2 hours a week, but they're doing a lot of the work for you. Avalara has something called professional implementation, where basically we call it the white glove service, where we're really we've got somebody handling all of the setup for AvaTax, returns, and the exemption certificate management. We work directly with SWK to make sure that we're getting all of that done for you. We basically take a lot of the legwork off. It is not really customer doing led. It is all Avalara led, but behind the scenes, because it's SWK that's doing it with us.
Yep, agree.
Okay, great to know, guys. Our next question that came in is, when you hit this economic threshold, are you automatically registered in the state?
I'll take that one too.
Yeah,
No.
question.
Oh, you were going to take it, Cameron?
No, go ahead.
Okay, please. No, you're not automatically registered. You have to get registered. So when you create Nexus into a state, if the question was, if you're with Avalara and hit Nexus, there's a slide that we didn't have. I wish we did have it up. It's in Avatax, there's a dashboard. And on that dashboard, we basically are monitoring all of your transactions, not only the ones that not only in the states that you're registered, but we're monitoring all of the transactions that you're doing across the states. And basically, you have a heat map that's on your dashboard, and it will let you know whether or not you have created Nexus. And it's a color map, and the states in yellow will let you know that you've hit 80% threshold. And then if that state particularly lights up orange, it's going to let you know that you've created Nexus. And would you like Avalara to get you registered and have a conversation with a tax director so you understand why you hit Nexus, and then make that determination. And you don't have to have Avalara do the registration. You can go get registered yourself, but it's literally the click of a mouse on getting registered when we identify that. And if that question was if you're with Avalara, if it's not, no, you have to go get registered.
Yep.
Okay, great to know. And you know, our next question that came through, you know, some of that might have answered this question as well, but just to go ahead and ask it, what would you recommend if my company exceeds most of the state's economic nexus thresholds, but has not registered anywhere yet? So just registered in their home state. And do they need to worry about historical liability?
Great, Will. So that goes to that last slide, which is my favorite one, is the risk assessment. So that risk assessment, basically, we send you that survey, and we will look at the historical data as well. So we will collect, first we'll start with 12 months worth, and then when we set up that call after the survey is complete, we meet with one of our tax directors. And I work with a tax director, his name is Steve Cabrera. I work with him all the time. And Steve used to be an auditor for California, so he has sat on both sides of the table. So he really gives good recommendation and digs into what the findings were. And if we identify that there's a particular state, like the person mentioned in the question, that, hey, maybe it was 4 or 5 years worth, we will collect that information, and we would do something called a VDA, voluntary disclosure. A voluntary disclosure means we go to the state unanimously and say, hey, we have a customer that wasn't aware that they created Nexus, and they're looking to get compliant and get registered. So we are looking to pay the liability, and Avalara will get the fees, or excuse me, the penalties and interest waived. So that's what a voluntary disclosure does. And one of the key things I like to make sure I always share is, don't get registered in a state if you know that you have past due liability, because once you get registered in a state, a VDA is off the table. You are not allowed to do a VDA after you've already registered in a state. So basically, to answer the question simply, doing a risk assessment and then having a tax director, not even having to pay a CPA, like, it's free, this whole service. And that tax director is really going to give you direction and advice on how we should proceed in particular states. For example, I'm sorry to go off on this question because it's an important one. in certain states, the liability might be low. So you basically would just get registered and tuck some of that into the first return, or we do back returns. So in a nutshell, we basically will go over that with the customer after we do the risk assessment. And I like to always share risk assessments. They don't go anywhere. Like, it's yours and that's it. And what you do with it is your business. And, you know, with that said, you know, the decisions from what you do with the risk assessment are ultimately yours.
Okay. No, I'm glad. I mean, this is an excellent time to dive deep into it. So thank you for, you know, going all the way in.
Cameron knows how passionate I am about risk assessment.
I love it. It's a great tool.
And then I think this is going to be our last question, unless, you know, we have a last minute entry. But can you let us know, where do you see the most businesses being audited and receiving fines?
I mean, Brian, you can probably echo it better than I can because you talk to a lot of the customers. But I mean, for me, it doesn't seem one state or the other. I mean, obviously, Washington, Colorado, New York, Florida, Texas, California. I mean, very complex when it comes to taxes and what they're expecting and out there. But I mean, I would say it is across the board been an increase in auditing and folks that are coming out there. I know the current administration was working to get more IRS agents out in the field and on foot patrol. So I don't know if it's necessarily one state or the other. I think it's just an overall increase since probably 2020, 2021. Do you see that as well, Brian, in talking to customers?
Yeah, I mean, I'll, you know, two pieces. Most of my phone calls are because of California and Colorado. And, you know, I joke about it. It's because Colorado is so complex and everyone's scared of California. It's, you know, like Cameron said, I think it's after the pandemic, because of so much online sales and across lines, you know, across state sales, you know, audits have increased significantly. The other area, you know, I shared a little bit before, I think the easiest audit trap is the exemption certificates. When, you know, because if you're basically not, a sale comes in, we're tax exempt, okay, great, and you're not collecting a certificate, you know, and I'm not saying this, I don't like to play fear factor, but you're acting as an agent of the state by not, you know, and you're supposed to be collecting a certificate. So that's the one that I hear the most when I am dealing with customers, is they didn't have the proper certificates, they didn't have all the certificates, you know, they played on the honor system. But yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, agree. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Was that the last one, Courtney?
yes, I was about to say that was the last one. So thank you guys so much. Super informative. Really thankful to have you with us here today. And then anyone in the audience, if you did not, you know, if you let us know that you're interested in that risk assessment, or if you let us know in the follow-up survey, we will contact you. But you can also reach out to your SWK rep and they will put you in contact with Brian. And Cameron, obviously, you know, works with him closely as well. So we thank you for your time today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.